Firstly, thank you very much for coming to this Zane Bambola's Fringe event. Nicole and I, Zane's mummy and daddy, really appreciate it. We'd like to thank Surrey County Branch for calling for this Fringe session to be part of Zane's Law as a motion that you heard at the last conference. Please remember Zane for the handsome little boy that he was. We miss him constantly, every minute of the day. He brought us love and joy from the moment that he was born. Today, we will provide an update from when we last attended the conference, which was in February 2020. You see, children should not die and the truth behind their deaths go uninvestigated. Must avoid using logic in Zane's case. It's a state cover-up. Indeed, these are the words of elected members of the Borough Council who had an extraordinary meeting in September 2020 and unanimously agreed that there had indeed been a cover-up. As you can see from the video, Zane's case is horrific. The killing of a child is horrific. Zane was an innocent 7-year-old killed in the brutal early hours of the 8th of February 2014 when his Victorian home was filled with deadly hydrogen cyanide. Nicole found Zane collapsed. She screamed for help. She tried to resuscitate Zane and dialed 999, not knowing that her own life was in mortal danger. She could collapse at any moment, presenting as the Skripals did in the Salisbury poisonings. Despite the horror, nothing, absolutely nothing in terms of access to the truth that sits in plain sight has changed since the day that Zane was killed. The abuse of unaccountable power attacked us day one and continues to this day. However, there has been many and a relentless battle fighting for justice, and we've been doing that from many quarters. This is little Zane. Zane was also a Taekwondo black belt leader. At the age of 6, he read at the age of a teenager. He was a young science, technology, engineering and maths ambassador and worked with engineering icons such as Richard Noble. He's a world land speed record holder. At his last Taekwondo grading, the sensei didn't have enough belts to award to the successful students. But as a leader, Zane suggested that his belt be given to a female student who he knew would be absolutely made up if she was able to take her belt home to show her parents. This was very moving. We don't see this in terms of adults foregoing awards, let alone children. But Zane, he had no problem in taking the lead. Zane was killed a week after, so he never ever received his belt. He had to receive it posthumously. Zane was loving, he was very caring about adults as well as children, and was articled for his environmental work. And one of his quotes are, "People think that being green and sustainability is about looking after their garden, but it's about looking after an even bigger garden." And of course, Zane was referring to the world. There is so much that I could tell you about Zane, so it's nice to hear from others, because I could probably go on for many days. But this is what his headmaster said at the House of Lords. He said that Zane was amongst the best known pupils in the school. Zane was a founding father of the Green Eco Committee. Back when such things were in their infancy, Zane was a proud eco-warrior. As a headmaster, I don't often teach, but by some providence, I taught Zane religious education and football. He loved both. almost as much as he loved environmental matters. Days before Zane died, he asked, "What's it like in heaven?" I think and pray for him every morning. I do a little pilgrimage to the beautiful Zane's Eco Garden. Had he lived, Zane's last week in the middle school would have been 2018. Zane did small and large things with great love. On his last evening with us, Zane returned from school, keen to protect the elderly from the local flooding caused by the Environment Agency releasing water from upstream. Zane wanted to ensure that the elderly people received their medicines, mitigating the harm that was going to be done to them by the flooding. So you see, Zane very much fought for the living, and now it's our time to fight for him. This is Zane's mummy. I'll pause for a few seconds so you can see. Zane. This is when Zane and Nicole were travelling to London to cheer on Daddy doing a 10k run. I'd literally be on the floor and I'd hear Zane's voice, "Come on, Daddy, come on." And I'd get this burst of energy, get back up and go for the finish. Nicole would do the 100-mile Prudential cycle ride. She'd do that in under 4 hours, which is pretty amazing. We did all things together before being thrown into the abyss. The hydrogen cyanide was detected by specialist hazmat in a major incident necessitating evacuating the whole area and decontaminating more than 50 emergency workers. A bridge over the River Thames at Chertsey had to be closed off. Unknown to us, the house is next to secret contaminated landfill, and it is from this land that is only 6 metres away from the house that the floodwater flowed into our open to the earth flood basement. If Nicole had not managed to raise the alarm that night, many people would have died. When we bought the house in 2004, environmental searchers said, "The land's clean." Please note, the road that you will see here, there's no water on it, and that's because the water never came from the river. It came from the land that was contaminated behind our home. As made national news a year ago, 12 miles of river was cordoned off between Walsall and Birmingham because deadly cyanide was in it. At a sham inquest, the authorities brought in enabling experts. It's the only word for them. Enabling experts who, in the witness box, claimed cyanide cannot flow through water. Lies, deception, misdirection are constant in Zane's case, and shame on those that were paid money to cover up Zane's death. For Zane, the state went on to create a war on truth. At every turn, the state got ahead of the truth by lying in the media. The house was actually an all-electric house. This is the reason why there would be no carbon monoxide that could be detected. As shown on hazmat gas detection sheets, there was no carbon monoxide. The 100 decibel petrol pump that was at the rear of the house, just yards from neighbours' bedroom windows, remember I said 100 decibel, the neighbours said that they didn't hear this pump. 100 decibels is the sound of a jet engine. In May 2014, the Health and Safety Executive tested the pump and secretly reported to the coroner that actually the pump was defective and it wouldn't have worked even if it had been tried to be used. It was broken and could not run. Hence, of course, there was no carbon monoxide detections. This was never disclosed to us, yet throughout 2014 to 2016, the police were trying to force confessions from us that the pump was running. Within minutes of entering our home, it was apparent what had happened. Commanders declared a major incident on the 8th of February, and I repeat, the area was evacuated for weeks and 50 workers were decontaminated. A bridge was closed off, as I'd said before. Now I'm going to tell you about the National Incident Record Log that you can see. This log went to Porton Down, and it went on to Emergency Cobra. And it records, I quote, hydrogen cyanide poisoning, death of a child. Efforts to silence began from day one. I'm going to quote the log again. It states no sensitive material is allowed into the public domain. Neighbouring properties were evacuated and their houses were cleared of poisonous gases. The water runoff was coming from the gravel pit, states that. Clear quote. Another quote, the crew fully kitted out with oxygen apparatus. And then another key quote, detected very high readings of hydrogen cyanide. The FOI's Freedom of Information state that the hospital was overwhelmed with unwell people. Medical records confirmed that no one could return to that Victorian house. Hydrogen cyanide was detected. Our own medical records confirmed we have hydrogen cyanide in our blood. You see, any basic critical thinking shows that a major incident is all about the hydrogen cyanide, because you simply do not have a major incident that goes to Porton Down and Cobra for carbon monoxide. Only a CBRN, that's chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear incident would go to that level. It is beyond shocking that this was hidden from us, as well as the true nature of the land being a secret landfill with historic major incidents. Let me tell you some of those major incidents. Workmen barely escaped with their lives after hitting chemical drums, 1972. Whole streets needed to be evacuated because the families were poisoned by chemicals, 1966. Many animal deaths have occurred on that site. Records show 30,000 tonnes of experimental tipping. The BBC exposed Ministry of Defence dumped cyanide behind Zane's home. The sister site of this site, a few miles up the road, was remediated for cyanide. So you see, the cyanide has never been about the quotes that you see. Oh, this is what the family believes. You know, that's just gaslighting you, and it's gaslighting us. It's simply about the facts. Hydrogen cyanide was detected in Zane's home multiple times. However, the authorities turned their back on us. We were fighting for our lives in hospital from day one. On the same day, the first emergency Cobra took place. Within minutes, the emergency Cobra started its disinformation, misinformation system. It spun into action and false narratives began. A Cabinet Office spokesman told the world's media, including the BBC, ITV, Sky, that the little boy in Chertsey had died from carbon monoxide poisoning caused by exhaust fumes through the parents' use of petrol pumps. The false narratives were used by authorities to blame the parents, attack the parents, and it was global. As with other scandals, the authorities win so long as they ensure the victims are not believed. Hydrogen cyanide was the gas used to kill people in World War II gas chambers. I was found in cardiac arrest. I was in another room, but I was only 6 foot away from Zane. My flesh blistered and peeled off my head, my back, and I was diagnosed paralysed due to hydrogen cyanide poisoning. You know, if it does this to a 6 foot bloke, don't even think about what it would do to a child. I reiterate, had Nicole not managed to raise the alarm that night, many people would have died. Nicole and I are just ordinary people. We're just like you. But according to the British Medical Journal, 80% of people in this country live within 2 kilometres of landfill. Also shocking, in 2010, Environment Agency commissioned a geotechnical report, and that geotechnical report was for planning permission for their application for a new property. Indeed, there were multiple secret geotechnical reports stating unacceptable risk of migrating landfill gases through that landfill, and the consequences of those gases were serious injury and death. A planning condition precedent stated that the property required the land to be assessed and then, of course, remediated. Instead, to minimise the costs, the Environment Agency agreed to use gas-proof membranes to protect their employees and occupiers whilst leaving their neighbours, including children, at risk of death. Yes, Zane's death was both forewarned in 2010 through these geotechnical reports. So what we're saying is that 4 years before Zane was killed, not only was the regulator informed people could be killed, but they acted on that information to protect themselves. It is clear, therefore, Zane's death was totally preventable. Zane could have been saved by 5 words. When the Environment Agency and Spelthorne Borough Council were patrolling the area, they could have simply said, "You are in danger. Leave." In Loscoe, a house blew up in 1986. 3 people were injured. In under a week, the investigation by the Health and Safety Executive, the fire services et al. Determined the cause was migrating gases that caused the explosion. In weeks, the law was changed, and the landowner was held to account using a law, Ryland versus Fletcher. Lord Clark says, tragedies require timely honesty. Zane was killed. Nothing. To be clear, in a neighbouring local authority whose landfill leachates killed a man, they said action must be taken on landfill known to have contamination, or the authorities become open to liability. The local authority said the land must be investigated. Local authorities must never knowingly permit pollution. So you see, decent leaders can tell the truth when irremediable events occur. Animals regularly die on the site. Of course, for the case of this horse, there was a police guard because they didn't want anybody to know. The main photo, however, shows a council and environment agency how they equip their people to go onto the land, dressed in double-layered PPE and breathing apparatus, despite being in the open air. To this day, the council have refused to test the land, even though that would be contrary to the geotechnical reports that they've been doing. We experienced at every turn systemic misdirection, refused contact. We were left in the dark, sanitized evidence, exclusion, obfuscation, diversion, gaslighting, non-disclosure, delays, implicated organisations marking their own homework, not listening, victim blaming, wrongdoing supported by the state. There's a malign culture during investigations that affects communities' access to justice. Now, in recent years, we found that others have been killed living in proximity to contaminated land, and it has become apparent similar modus operandi have been used across this country. One should never believe that the scandal of contaminated land is a victimless crime. As Zane's law gathered support across the country, it soon became clear that death and harm was a national problem. So we formed a grassroots coalition of 46 landfill and water campaigns, and that coalition is known as the UK Landfill Campaign. And campaigners' voices must be heard. Now, let me tell you a bit about the background. In 1972, William Price, an MP, led a debate on cyanide dumping and toxic waste impacting public health. Hauliers were on strike, refusing to dump cyanide across the country. The debate notes that come the year 2000, people in this country will start dying of what has been dumped as the barrels corrode and leach. We were joined by allies in an alliance and a movement for the truth about Zane. In 2021, Zane's Law was launched by Nicole and I at COP26, together with Baroness Bennett and Jeremy Corbyn from the Peace and Justice Project. Zane's campaign operates hand in glove with the truth about Zane and Zane's Law. We work for a collective good. They are value-driven and stand for truth and social justice, human rights, public health, and rights to a clean, healthy, sustainable environment. And this must be done to international standards. The authorities that have already signed up to Zane's Law include Lewes District Council, Brighton City and Hove Council, Ada, Rother, Worthing, Stroud, the London Assembly. They've all passed unanimous motions. Zane's joined up all stripes, all colours, unanimous motions to protect their constituents. It's real grassroots campaigning. At a sham inquest, we were denied legal aid for any kind of representation, whilst, as Andy Burnham puts it, and he so clearly puts it, a phalanx of the best QCs money can buy, appointed by public authorities, was set against us, paid for by the public purse. Even the coroner had an additional QC paid for by legal aid. When there is a hint, just a hint of state involvement in a death, Article 2 Human Rights Act inquests are required, where the state must carry out an enhanced investigation into the wider circumstances of that death. An enhanced investigation. This was denied to Zane. Zane was stripped of his human rights. Witnesses and evidence were denied. Even my paraplegia due to hydrogen cyanide poisoning was denied. A jury was denied. Efforts were made to discredit the family, but there was no effort to get to the truth. The sham inquest had no duty of candour, no parity of arms, and enabled a disinformation discourse. We were forced to sign a gagging order by the coroner, threatening us with imprisonment. This move was blasted by Sir Keir Starmer, former chief of the Crown Prosecutions, who said open justice is a key legal principle in this country. To prohibit a family from using recordings of proceedings which were open to the public is totally unjustifiable. Sir Keir Starmer, he gets it. In Zane's case, he called for an independent panel inquiry when speaking to the Mail on Sunday, and he also said a full investigation is needed. When he spoke to the Mirror, he said, there are real concerns in Zane's case, and I am sure that there are other examples that could be prevented if we get to the truth of this. Zane has many vocal supporters, and they range across people from Dawn Butler, Baroness Bennett, Caroline Lucas, Alex Chalk, Jess Phillips, David Lammy, so on and so forth. Zane has cross-party support. We have long made clear, and Zane's in the Labour Party manifesto, as a historic injustice. We've long made clear the death of a child should not be political. And neither should a death involving a child be a political cover-up. It is basic humanity and morality. Zane had unalienable rights to the truth. Look at one's own children, and you will know what is right to do. Here is a picture of Zane, of the Parliamentary Justice Summit. A friend of mine who was on the infected blood inquiry, he said, take a look at that picture, Kai. Zane's case is the only one that has not had any judicial inquiry. Only one. That was from 2016. A commander, when we look at the Dawn Sturgis inquiry, that was done with the ultimate in sensitivity and in the Dawn Sturgis inquiry. The commander commented that the bigger the area that needs to be evacuated, the more serious the incident. In Amesbury, the evacuation was just one drive. In Chertsey, the whole area needed to be evacuated. We endured abuse, conduct, including the coroners, QCs, and they were laughing. They called themselves the mafioso, but they got caught. The inquest was a masterclass in collusion, worthy of any corrupt regime. Zane's law provides enforceable law for the protection of communities harmed from living in proximity to toxic landfill and polluted controlled water. So Zane's law talks about protecting people. And let me tell you what it's protecting people from. People that live on these landfills have respiratory issues, asthma, stroke-like symptoms, skin irritations, headaches, vomiting, endocrine and reproductive disorders, birth defects. They have fruits in their gardens that they can't eat because of poisons. They have specific cancers that occur, tumours, neurological and immune system damage, swarms of flies, sudden fires. Their homes are valued at zero. These are amongst the most grave impacts that can happen to anybody. When we look at the post office inquiry, Hillsborough, infected blood, and then you see little Zane, whose unbelievably cruel and frankly wicked story brought all of the UK landfill campaigns together. Steve Wright from the Fire Brigade Union, he said that contamination of unregulated historic landfill, and this is in a press release recently, is a danger to the environment and health as well as lives. With the climate emergency resulting in increasing floods, which threaten the spread of contamination, and the government, everyone should have the right to live in a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment. Now, so that was the press release from the Fire Brigade Union. And now, on the next slide, let me tell you what you can do. So the one slide before just says that this is a picture of the summit that we had. What you can do, just 10% the membership, so 10% UNISON challenge. So the message will go out to sign a petition. That's one thing that you can do. You'll be doing the second at the end, holding Zane's picture up. The third, support the FBU resolution at the TUC And then the final thing is to action support amongst general secretaries from various unions. We're going to approach a session where you can make contributions and comment on what I've just said. But it should never be the job of grieving parents to fight for justice for their child. That's the job of everyone, as we see happens when children have horrific deaths. When the reaction was Zane's life doesn't matter, as parents you have a choice. And you can either decide to fight for your child and to protect others, or you can choose to do nothing and just watch the bodies pile high at some later point in time. We also are supporters of the Hillsborough Law to torpedo scandals, and this requires a change in culture from our public institutions. And that requires a statutory duty of candour and parity of arms. So Thomas Bingham had always said foul play, abuse and inhumanity has no place in law. And let me tell you, until this preventable scandal ends, as a default, people like us are going to keep growing and keep fighting for our health and human rights, and to stop intergenerational harm leaching into people's tomorrows. To be clear, wrestling justice from the state cannot be left to victims. It's the job of everybody. Zane's inquiry is about innocent children and adults being killed. All we ever wanted, Paul and I, is the truth about what happened on that night. And if that's properly recognised through fearless investigation, then we can grieve in peace. If there is one thing that comes from this, it's that it should never happen again. And if they can do this for Losco, they can do this for Zane. But if we tolerate this, the nightmare of further children not waking up will continue. Thank you.